Houston, August. I'm here today with Jason. I think I asked you, Lauritsen, I think. So Jason Lauritsen is here, and he is a social media specialist with Houston Methodist. And what was really interesting to me about him is he came up to me and talked to me one day after one of the breakfasts and kind of shared with me his passion and excitement about return on investment for social media. And sometimes when people talk about ROI, they're not really talking about ROI, they're talking about all kinds of other things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but Jason has actually figured out how to look at financial results through social media for the hospital. Okay, so a hospital doesn't have, you know, a product that it sells online. So I get this question. I mean, I speak about social media measurement all around the country. It's actually one of the biggest things I speak about when I go out. And the biggest question is always, well, we don't sell anything online, and so how do we connect it to our bottom line? So I was very excited to bring a true living, breathing person that does this on a regular basis. So thank you, Jason, for coming. We have on the screen up here the Twitter handles, and they keep flipping around. I also tweeted it at KamiChat, K-A-M-I-C-H-A-T, which is my handle, and I'm Kami Hoyza, for those who don't know who I am. So if you want to look there to get the handles, that's great, and tweet, that's awesome. We keep track of those at the end with that. So without further ado, welcome, Jason, and I have a couple of questions to start with. So let's start with that question. How do you define ROI? Can you talk about that?
Can you hear me? So ROI is a business metric, and what Kami was referring to was the fact that people usually make ROI into anything but that. So they'll take Facebook likes, Twitter retweets, and cram them into some kind of magical formula and say that's our ROI. That doesn't work. The point of ROI is it always stays a cost and revenue metric regardless of the medium you're working in. So I don't care if you're doing magazines, billboards, social media, insert any other mechanism here. It always comes back to what is the cost of your investment and what's the gain. And actually, I scheduled some tweets, so it's about 8:35. That first one should be going out. It shows you the two formulas you always use for ROI. There's this basic net dollar, and then you have your percentage. And again, that's where the problem arises, right? You know, I'm sure you've encountered it all the time. Is someone makes up a formula and they just say, oh, you know, Facebook like is this and that, and they'll go, oh, but I saw it on the Harvard Business Review blog, so it must be good. And so, you know, just because someone has an MBA doesn't mean what they're telling you is accurate. So again, that's the basis of ROI. It's super simple, and you don't need to complicate it any further than that.
So that sounds easy, but it's not easy, because then how do you find that metric? So for your business, for example, as a hospital, so what kind of things do you measure as ROI? I mean, could you list some of the things you guys measure?
Yeah. So what we look at is, basically how much the patient is spending after. So this is just total return revenue after, you know, insurance and other fixed costs come out of the wash. So what happens, maybe I could walk you kind of through our funnel.
That'd be great.
Okay, so what happens is, you know, your basic sales funnel 101 is, you know, reach, act, and then convert. Yeah, there's, you know, you can throw other stuff in there like nurturing the lead and moving them back. That's the basic of everything. So what happens is we, you know, make that initial contact with someone, say it's through Facebook. We might direct them to a landing page on our website. If they fill out a form, it goes to our contact center. If they call a number, it goes to our contact center. So the contact center is the nexus of that funnel. From there, they're assigned a patient ID number. And that follows them for, I think it's a period of about 15 months or so through our system. So during that 15-month period, they're tagged as coming in via social media. Or if you call and you say, I saw a magazine ad, and you're tagged as that. But during that period, as long as they bring in revenue for the hospital, I can run a quarterly report, and I can go, here's your social media ROI, and then we can factor in our costs, which I was talking about, which is, okay, how much did we spend on Facebook advertising? Okay, you know, how much overhead do we have for social media tools, and get an accurate read on that? Because right now, social media for, I would say, the majority of organizations is just a cost center. You know, people aren't showing revenue. They're not showing cost savings. So for instance, if you do customer service, there's a way you can show how much you're saving the company. So it's just this giant cost center. So it's just a matter of how big your organization is and how long you want to, kind of let you play around in this ecosystem before they come to you one day, someone from the C-suite or someone connected to it and goes, all right, you've been doing this for about 2 years now. I haven't seen any dollar amount for what you're doing. And, that day will eventually come, or they'll just kind of yank the carpet out from under you, so to speak.
Yeah, so you're talking about a little bit, and I think this is interesting, the idea of cost savings or whatever. So the person, as you said, comes in through whatever mechanism, they come to your call center. Your call center is then required to ask them, like, where did they hear about you? Is that kind of what it works out to be?
Right. Right, or when they fill out a form, it's going to have like a social media Dropbox item, because the form online, it just kicks an email to the contact center. So it'll say, heard about you on social media, and then they get tagged in the system. So again, it follows the customer. Again, we can't follow them through their entire life cycle. Because for instance, your life cycle for your organization, might be 10 years or 24 years or whatever. But we can follow them for that initial period, and as long as they come in for a patient visit, then that period where we can follow them gets rebooted. So it's like, yeah, I believe it's about 15 months. So maybe the initial point of contact is 15 months. They don't do anything for 14, but they come in, toward the end of the 14th, maybe they get their blood drawn or just basic lab work. Then they don't come in for 10. We're still going to be able to track them. They can fall out of the funnel, so to speak. But that's still a method of tracking them as compared to just not doing anything at all.
So do you guys take credit for all of what they spend during that time? So well, first of all, let's just say not all patients are made equally, right? Is that correct? Could you talk a little bit about like the value of a patient? I know that's kind of weird sounding, but
yeah. So there's two ways you can look at this. One is you can calculate average customer lifetime value, and then you can break that up into years and quarters, and then that's what we're doing in the near future. Right now we're looking at averages, per like referral mechanism, but then we're going to dice it. So it'll be like, yeah, they came in from social media, but how much does the average heart patient who came in from social media spend? So again, if you understand the process and the system that you set up, you can adapt to the future technology. But if you don't set up that process and know where you need to go in and kind of adjust things, then you're kind of out of luck. But if it's set up properly, then you can kind of do that. You have your aggregate data, then you can go in and slice and dice it how you want it.
So let's walk down that funnel a little bit more. So let's say you're slicing and dicing it, and you find out that heart patients, spend on average 10% more than, I don't know, whatever, cancer patients, I don't know. So let's just put that out there. So then you could then take your marketing budget or your advertising spend and target people that have heart conditions, or target people that might want to come in to, could you kind of explain what your thoughts are on that, or how you do that?
So the options available for Facebook targeted advertising are pretty broad. They have certain rules about if you're advertising to people with health conditions, so you have to be careful. But yeah, we can definitely look at that. Do heart patients spend 10% more than orthopedics patients? Because that's where the real value comes from. It's actually our social media team does not even have a budget for advertising. It all comes from our service lines. So there's a heart service line. Yeah. So what you're getting at is I can then go back to the person that manages heart and be like, hey, here's the total ROI for social media. Okay, here's it broken out by heart. It might be wise for you to spend 10% more this quarter, and target in this way versus the person who's managing orthopedics. Because we've kind of noticed like certain campaigns we do, like when we advertise free heart screenings, that drives in a lot of leads, and they actually become patients. Whereas when we do like, do you have general joint pain, or like that stuff, the call to action isn't very strong, right? So you just slowly kind of keep that data, because you have that quantitative set, and then that's that qualitative lens. You put on everything where you try to zero in. Okay, what is resonating, what's working. everything's tagged with Google Analytics, so we can kind of zero in on what ad set brought someone there. So was it the copy that was super effective? Was it just really good timing? Was it like breast cancer awareness month? What was going on?
I'm glad you brought up Google Analytics because we do want to talk about that a little bit. So what I've gotten from this so far, a lot of interesting things, but the first one is if you have an online forum, you should have a little drop-down list that asks people where they heard about you from. Is that correct?
Right. Absolutely, and you should set up a goal for completion of that form. And you and I were talking the other day about how easy it actually is to set up goals and funnels in Google Analytics. I'm tweeting out a video from KISS Metrics that just walks you through it. Because I know a big problem in a lot of organizations is people go, I don't do the analytics, the web guy does that. Or, I don't do this, the marketing research person does that. And really, it's fine if they take the main ownership of that, but you still need to be involved. So again, you can pull these metrics, you can adjust your spending, you can be very nimble and agile. That's the great things about startups. They're disruptive, they can kind of move on them. They can pivot really easily, whereas, you work for a big organization like I do, we have over 15,000 employees, we got 7 hospitals, you do get dragged into, 2-hour-long discussions about, just like brand standards and stuff. So, again, you need to have these mechanisms in place so you're not dependent on other people. And, just as it's a general good thing for your career. The more skills you have, the more, attractive it's going to make you to the people you currently work for. You can move up within the organization. If you're not happy there, you can go somewhere else. So again, always adding to that skill set. But again, the important thing is understanding the processes and systems, because how many analytics suites are there right now? GA, Google Analytics is big, but there's Adobe Omniture. There's probably about 10 more I've never even heard of. So again, if you understand how to set up a funnel, you know what a goal is, you can follow that process, you can then work with those people on your team and go, okay, I'm trying to do this. I think the customer enters here. I'm noticing that I'm seeing 50 conversions on Google Analytics, but the call center is only seeing 30. How do we reconcile that data? So again, tracking down your leads.
Yeah, and that was an interesting discussion we had too, is that part of it is also training within your organization. So if you do have 50 people who in the forum said they heard about you on social media, but on the call center they say only 30 came through, can you kind of explain to me like how you're handling that particular discrepancy?
Yeah, so a thing that's do we have any people here today that are in healthcare or for hospitals or anything? So you might be aware of this, but if they come in as a lead to like your contact center or your equivalent, if that agent makes a mistake and say it's Facebook, but they put in billboard, we are not allowed to go back and change that. That is patient information at that point. So it's not the same as if you sell widgets and someone messed up. You can go back there and change it. There's no regulation about that. You're fine. So what we have to do is figure out lead values and calculate those averages, and then again slice and dice that information up. So if I go, yeah, I know 30 came from GA, and I see 30 and I see 10 or 15 in the contact center, the estimated value of what we missed out on is this. And then again, get back to the team and go, hey, okay, last quarter you guys missed out on 50 leads. You didn't attribute them correctly. But for some reason this quarter you gave me an extra 50. Like what is going on? And again, it sets that continual training process.
And I think that's interesting too. Let's kind of back up a little bit and talk about the value of leads, because you just said that sort of offhandedly, but I don't know if everybody understands about how you calculate the value of a lead. Could you talk about in detail how you are going about calculating the value of leads?
Yeah, so we're looking at right now average contribution margin, and then we break that up into time periods, and then we again, we'll probably slice and dice that data further. For
the average method they spend. English.
English. Not non-super technical marketing speak. Yeah. So contribution margin for us is basically just what I've been talking about, basic ROI. So it's just what the total revenue the company sees once we wash out all those fixed costs, such as insurance, any costs for the doctors. So again, we're looking at, okay, what is that average return on investment or contribution margin, and then we're plugging that into formulas that Google provides. I can actually tweet out the link. It's not one of the ones I have prepared, but Google has a really easy help document that says, okay, here's how you calculate the value of a lead. Here's how you factor in word of mouth to amplify that, because we all know, especially for a hospital system, a lot of your referrals come via people saying, my cousin went there, my mother went there, my friend went there, and see, we actually have that data. We have that data in our contact center where we know the volume of patients, and then we know how many referred via word of mouth. So we can then plug that in to that equation and go, okay, the amplification from word of mouth is whatever, 15%. And again, this is all available on a basic Google help document. You could probably just Google it right now, how to measure the value of a lead, and it comes up. And all this is like basic addition, subtraction, multiplication. Maybe some algebra. It's not difficult.
Algebra, come on, Jason. You're bringing up easy algebra. That's great. So, I like what you're saying, that there's a lot of basic training online. You're a big, huge hospital system in a sense. I mean, you're big. You're not maybe as big as some others, but you're kind of big. So what would you recommend for somebody who's a smaller business that has this? Probably they have more ability to do this, but what would your recommendations be?
Are you talking about to start measuring ROI? So you have to figure out, what you're measuring for your company in terms of revenue. Is it just sales of widgets? Okay, or are you a media company and maybe 100% of your sales, your lifeblood, is the fact that you sell advertising online? Okay, we'll go to your sales team and say, I understand that 100% of our revenue comes from advertising, like display ads, pay-per-click, whatever. Okay, how do you decide what to charge people? And maybe they'll go, oh, we charge people based on, this rate, this traffic, this rate for this many page views, or maybe we charge them for, average time on site. So again, understanding what your organization values, and then plugging into that equation. Okay, well, how can we track that? Because again, at the end of the day, all this stuff is pretty trackable. Like even if you work for a nonprofit, okay, you're probably going to be looking at donations. Again, standard e-commerce, you're selling, widgets, or if you're a consulting agency, you're getting people to download white papers that then turn into leads, and then you can follow them through your customer relationship management platform. Or if you don't have any of these tools, Excel works very well. Again, just kind of bootstrapping things together, and again, following the process. I can't emphasize how critical that is. Don't get hung up on a tool. You may not have the budget for it for next year, or it may be a startup that goes out of business, and then you're dependent on whatever that tool was magically doing in the background. Yeah, and you didn't actually understand the process, and you can't replicate it with your next tool.
Yeah, I would say that that's been my experience too, is that data consistency is really difficult to get over time, especially if you're completely relying on a tool and nothing else. Also, figuring out what exactly to measure. So you're talking about ROI here, and that's great. But do you measure like how many likes you get, how many people follow you? I mean, do you measure that stuff? And if so, how do you report it?
So you're talking about just basic key performance indicators, KPIs. Yeah, we look at that, but we look at it in a very general sense. We've noticed when we try to do reports for people, and we say, oh, and this was from early on. You say, oh, you got this many Google +1s, and you got this many retweets, and you got this many Twitter favorites. People would just start going like, dude, you're giving me a headache. I don't understand. So we would just bundle stuff together. Here's how your audience size is growing in aggregate. Here's how your KPIs are moving in terms of just overall reach or impressions and engagement. Like, retweets, +1s, likes, all that just goes under an engagement umbrella. Because really, at the end of the day, what our organization cares about is how much revenue are you driving, and then customer service. So, can you perform wins for us? Because usually if someone reaches out to a hospital, It's not because they had a good experience. So can you turn that around? And if you can, and you can document it, then you can go back to those equations we were talking about and say, oh, well, if we know the quarterly, the yearly, the lifetime value is this, and we turn that patient around and they came back, guess what? Social media just saved your center, your hospital system, your business, $50,000, whatever, this quarter.
The other savings equation that might be interesting here is like customer service. In other industries, it costs a certain amount to do customer service. So if you're doing it through social media in a faster, more efficient way, you can also tag that as cost savings. Do you do that kind of thing, or you know about that?
Yeah, so no, but that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up. So we don't actually have like a traditional customer service arm. Like you don't, I mean, you can call various numbers, but they're usually, their aim isn't to be customer service centers. It's not like, you know, a cable company, a phone company. But that's a really good methodology to use, is if you do know you have a customer service center, then you can plug in, you know, okay, like how much are you guys spending a quarter, you know, how quickly do you resolve an issue, how quickly is social media, and then you can kind of plug in, you know, an hourly cost of, you know, one mechanism versus another, and then you can get those cost savings. For us, it's just purely, did we turn it around? Did they come back? And then we're going to plug it into that customer lifetime value, and you know, that's going to be sliced and diced. Because again, we don't have traditional customer service agents. It's the social media team that does it all.
And I think that's interesting too, because what I've also found in big groups like this is people will sit around thinking, well, that's not what I do, and we don't have that resource, and that's not the way I would approach it. So one of the things I find interesting is there's a lot of ways to look at what other people have done and creatively apply it to what you're doing. Don't be creative with the numbers now, but creative with the approaches, I guess, is what I say.
Yeah, actually, I had a really good example of that. So I came to Houston Methodist about a little over 2 years ago, and the social media presence was just basically Facebook and Twitter, and they would just push out press releases. And so when I said I'm going to do customer service, I looked outside of healthcare, because healthcare, I'm sure you know, is about 3 to 5 years behind everyone else in terms of technology and, you know, methodology and everything. So I looked at what Microsoft was doing with their Xbox division on Twitter for customer service. And I saw, oh, okay, they have a process they follow. They write their customer service hours in their Twitter profiles. Like, I'm just going to copy that. Because, again, all the person cares about is, I want to reach out to you, I want your response to be timely, and I want my issue resolved. That pattern, it works for any industry you're in. And then, of course, as we all know, it used to be like a year ago or whatever, it would be like, oh, if, you know, a consumer expects you to get back to them in like a day, and then the past year it's turned into like an hour. It's just going to keep shrinking and shrinking. And it just amazes me when I go to like a big brand, like my wife had a problem with e-shirts lately, and I went to the Facebook page. They don't respond to any negative feedback, yet they spent all that money on Super Bowl advertising, where, oh, tweet our hashtag, you could win $1 million. But imagine all the customers and bad word of mouth that is happening on social media because someone's going, I can't pay my bill, something funky's going on, and they're just going, I don't know.
Well, I also think that has to do with having the, I guess, authority to do something. So could you talk a little bit about how you got the authority to do all these things in the marketing PR kind of context?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started out in IT or web services, and right now I'm in PR and marketing. And I've been really fortunate to have good management the entire time I've been there. And basically their policy has been, I'm going to just let you go out there and try something because I know you're aware of HIPAA. I know you're aware of these regulations. I know you're going to check with the legal team and check it out beforehand. Yeah, and compliance, and make sure you're good to go. Because a lot of times, if you get to this point where you're trying to like check off every single box in a kind of an unnecessary fashion, then you're just like you never get anything done. So so for instance, like you don't go legal and say I want to do Twitter customer service, because for healthcare they go no. So what you go to them is you say, I'm going to do it. Here's the process I'm going to follow. Here's already like 10 examples of what could happen. And they're going to be much more like that. That initial conversation is going to be way more productive than just going, hey guys, I got an idea. No, that doesn't work at all. So, I mean, we've been really fortunate to basically do like trial balloons and just test something out, and if it works, we run with it.
Is anybody in here in the legal profession? I don't know. I don't see Katie or Travis out there today because they usually come, but, you know, I've always found that legal is always an initial no. You know, that's sort of the way that they do things. So, yeah, I mean, if you're smaller and you don't have to work with legal and compliance, this probably actually becomes less of a problem. But one of the things you talked about earlier is, like, let's get back to tracking ROI, kind of what it does. One of the things you talked about was tagging your links. So some people here might know what that means, but I bet you some of them don't. So could you explain in detail? I actually have a blog post I can also put up, but I'm not tagging links, but you can tag links for Google Analytics.
Absolutely. So just Google right now, Google URL Builder, and you will get the form you fill out. So anytime you build a link using Google's URL Builder, it asks you to put in parameters. And again, it's super easy because it says this, in this field you put this, and in this field you put this. Like, what is your campaign code? You know, is this ad copy? Okay, what's your source? Okay, you're going to put Facebook, Twitter, Google+. You know, and it's case sensitive, so you have to keep everything consistent. So, you know, if you're working with your digital marketing team and they're running a campaign, you know, be like, all right, guys, we're all using this code for this, right, and this one for this. All right, Bob, you're not randomly, you know, capitalizing the letter in the middle for some reason, are you? And that's it. And then once your link is tagged, you know, with those parameters, like say it came from Facebook, say you even put a date on it, you know, whatever. Then when they come to your site, Google's going to make that data much more rich instead of being a generic social media referral or maybe a Facebook on.
Tell them where you find it.
Yeah, it's in the referrals section. But if you're making campaigns, it's going to be under acquisitions and campaigns. So you're kind of double covered, because if you build your campaigns with Google URL Builder, you're covered under acquisitions and campaigns. And if you're forgetting to do it, Google's kind of nice because you just go into social referrals, and it's going to have that. The data isn't going to be as rich, but it's going to be there, because the nice thing is if you make that data more rich, then you can zero in. Like, we recently started a blog, and we wanted to know which blogs were driving leads. Well, every blog, if it's sending inbound traffic, if it's sending traffic to our website, it's tagged like author's name and date. So we can zero in and be like, okay, like for instance, I wrote a blog on sleep. It was probably our most popular blog in terms of social media shares and page views. But it didn't drive any conversions, whereas we had someone from our creative services team write about the difficulty of losing weight and, you know, how to contact the weight management center. 2 conversions. So we're kind of, you know, again, you're zeroing in on that. It's like, yeah, from the outside, my blog looked like it was really good. And all the shares, that's what you see on the outside. But on the inside, this one that has no comments, you know, it might have like 2 Facebook shares or whatever, just drove 2 potential patients to the hospital. So again, the advantage of, you know, building those links out and making it rich.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I guess if those of you who've never seen a tag, whenever you look at the URL, it'll have a question mark, and everything after the question mark's a tag. So if you see those when you're surfing around the web, some people have tagged their links. The other cool thing about tagging a link is that you can take that, put it in Bitly or whatever, and it shortens it just fine. And then it's still tracking it. It's not just Bitly tracking, like, you know, this many people clicked on this link. This becomes a lot more rich for your data. And since Google made a change a couple of years ago, or about a year and a half, whatever, where they stopped tracking the traffic, a lot of traffic comes in non-specified now to Google Analytics, because if you're logged into Google Analytics like I am, they have like scrubbed all the data. So they want, like, if I visit your site, I'm non-specified because I'm logged in. So you just, by tagging all your links, you give yourself a huge amount of an advantage, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, because they're not providing that data that they used to that was, you know, super rich, but you didn't really have to do much to get in the first place. Whereas now, as long as you tag that link, Google's going to give preference to, big surprise, its own products. So as long as you build it with Google's URL builder, it's going to work well and track through Google Analytics.
And I did write a blog post about exactly how to do that. I can tweet it out later, or somebody can search Google Analytics Builder and my name, and it'll come up. But so that, and I did it like step by step by step. Like, what do you put in the source? What do you put? So you want to do that. So could you talk a little bit about the obstacles for measuring ROI and sort of kind of the challenges that you're facing in what you do?
Yeah, so our initial problem was there was no process set up. You know, social media was just kind of like a bullhorn. You know, people would incorrectly call it a vertical communications channel, and they just push content out. So I had to have those conversations with people. It's like, okay, well, how does our funnel normally work for all these other mechanisms? Okay, how can we plug into that? And then when I figured it out, at the time, Google Analytics wasn't set up properly on our website, so we couldn't track conversions of forms. So we became super dependent from the outset on making them call the contact center. Whereas once we got Google Analytics working correctly on all our forms, then it became an either-or process. And then we could track both, see if they measure. Basically just set up the goals properly on the page. Again, it'll walk you through the process. You know, like, what are you trying to measure? Do you want to put a value on it? Again, be careful with values. I've heard of some organizations where they'll say, oh, every time someone comes to our website from our blog, just coming to the website, it's worth $5. Don't do that kind of stuff. You're always better off saying I don't know than making up a number. So Google Analytics is there, but the big problem for us is our CMS, our content management system, is really outdated. We're going to be doing a refresh in November. So again, it was like I knew what we had to do. It was just it's all bandaged together at this point. So it's working with IT and our digital marketing specialists to go, all right, come on, I know we can get this in there, and figuring out what would work for us. If you're on like WordPress or something very mainstream that's up to date, this stuff should literally take, like setting up GA should take you 5 minutes.
Sorry.
It's okay, somebody's calling me and my computer's showing it. Anyway, so thank you, Sandra, for being my secretary today. So anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, on the side there's a volume toggle. I can do it for you in a minute. Got it. So I will do that next time, guys. See, it's what you live and learn when you do these things in life. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about with that a little bit on setting up funnels and the goals and stuff like that. You talked about the value, adding a value. That would be maybe a place to put in a lead value if you maybe got it, had it figured out. But one of the things I think that's so important is that we do have to have data. So some of the people in here, who works for an agency in here? Okay, a couple. So, I mean, there's also the problem of getting data. So, if you work for an agency, your client has to trust you enough to give you their business data, which is not going to happen if you work for a hospital, for example. You can't give it to strangers. But my question is, like, what other business results are you tracking besides just ROI?
I mean, we already hit on customer service savings. We've got ROI. And then, just basic KPIs. I don't know if we're going beyond that. Again, healthcare is very slow, and even though I try to make us as nimble as possible, because we're in healthcare, like we were talking about legal, like it takes a while to get stuff off the ground. Again, social media doesn't have a budget, so if I want to run a campaign, I have to go to a service line person or someone else and say, here's the campaign I want to run, here's how much it's going to cost, and I don't have my own P card to do any of that stuff. I mean, for the better part of 2 years, we didn't even have social media relationship management software. Everything was done with free tools, native platforms, Excel sheets. We're always on call. Molly, who's down there, works on our social media team. She just joined us, and we're just, our standard response time during business hours is 20 minutes or less, and it's an hour or less outside of that, just because we know patients demand that. So, for instance, tonight, I'm on call. I'm checking my phone every hour to make sure, someone's not in the ER and they're upset. So we constantly have these challenges. And for us, the main thing is we probably aren't going to really move beyond like ROI and cost savings. We'll look at like volume of like patient service we're doing and things like that. And we're going to zero in on sentiment, like is this one community hospital, have more negative feedback than this one? And we're working on rolling out review and listings management, because we know, for instance, like if you can move from 3 to 4 stars, it's going to affect, the value of your business. But again, we're just going to be looking at those 2 main metrics because we know that's where the dollar value is, and then refining and dicing into that data to again go, okay, here's heart versus cancer versus this. And it's going to help our digital marketers know, okay, for pay-per-click for cancer, I'm probably spending too much, or I'm not spending enough, or I'm not targeting right.
Yeah. So along that line too, I guess that makes sense that you would like really narrow in and focus. And part of, I think, the problem with social media measurement right now is that we try to measure too much, maybe.
Yeah. I always tell people, just because you can measure it doesn't mean you should. Because you'll just get bogged down in that stuff. Now, it's nice if you have a tool that kind of does all that stuff for you. But again, when you're presenting data to other people, they just want to know, like, tell me the bottom line here. If the data is actually actionable, you can do something with it that's going to add value to your business, that's going to streamline processes. That's probably some good data. But just saying, oh, Facebook likes are this for this, and Twitter retweets are this for that. It's good when you're starting out, to see if your content is kind of resonating, but you really need to move beyond that. And I don't know how many times like someone puts out a column online and they go, here's how you measure social media ROI, and it just says you go into Facebook Insights and see your KPIs. I'm like, no, you don't do that. So again, I think we're in this weird period right now when social media was first getting off the ground for businesses. You probably remember this. Like, everyone's like, you're not starting a social media profile because I want to know how you're going to measure the dollar value. I want to know how it's going to drive this business. And then that kind of went away. And now we're at this period of like people go, oh, let me tell you the return on engagement or influence or all this other stuff. So it's weird. We went from, you're not even starting this thing, you're not getting it off the ground, you can show me the dollar value, to, oh, these vanity metrics are really cool. Yeah, they make you feel good, which is one of the pictures I tweeted out, is they generate a false sense of business success. You see from the outside that your post on, holding a puppy lowers your blood pressure or whatever. You see that got 50 likes and 10 shares. But how is that driving business for you at the end of the day? So again, people are kind of stuck on the vanity metrics space right now. It's easy to measure, it's public facing, it's got this allure, but at the end of the day, it's not going to tell you anything actionable for your business.
So are you, at this point, your department, are you neutral, are you making money for the business? Can you explain to us a little bit about how that's changed the way things happen around your office?
Yeah, so it's funny. So when I started there a little over 2 years ago, a lot of it was just writing policy, cleaning up listings. Every doctor wanted to have their own Facebook page, and they would have like their mom and their secretary would be like the 2 fans. And so I spent a long time just going, all right, here's what we're going to do. Here's why it's good for the business. Making the business case. But now we're at the point where we can show cost savings. We can show ROI. And I remember the light bulb going off for our marketers when the first time I presented to them, for a campaign. And I said, here's how many people registered at the Baytown Hospital. Here's how many people registered in the Med Center. Here's the ROI that we calculate from this. For instance, maybe on display, digital display, it took you $750 to get 1 lead that never actually became a patient, whereas you spent $20 for a lead on Facebook. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. I get it now, because I was outlining to them the process that they could follow and they could understand. And so that's just been really big now. Like, for instance, when we did our free heart screenings in February of this year, it was so successful from a social media standpoint of driving leads that I think we had allocated a budget of a couple $100. Once we got like about $180 into it, the contact center came to me and they're just like, stop, we're full, we can't take any more. So that shows the power of this this platform. And I don't think a lot of people are leveraging it. And it's again communicating to the people in your organization how that process is working. Like, for instance, I send out an internal email, and it's external now, every Friday. This educates people within the organization on, like, here's what LinkedIn is doing with, advertising now. Here's a new Facebook ad unit. Here's why that infographic you saw that said the best time to post to Facebook at 6 p.m. is complete BS. And it's, again, just internal education, because no one's going to be an expert in all these things, but it's making sure that everyone has, like, a good baseline so they can communicate effectively and work together.
That's great. I'm going to actually open up the floor to questions for a few minutes. We could probably talk forever. We figured that out on the phone, like, recently. So I'd like to hear what you want to know. Does anybody have a question about ROI, or maybe your own business? Like, do you have a challenge? We're willing to take on challenges today, too. Nobody? I'm going to call on somebody if you don't do it. Yeah?
I just have a question regarding, because your marketing team is a complete separate division, that's correct?
So he was asking about your marketing team, and is it separate?
And do they impose upon you or goals, things like that, or sharing?
Yeah, so we are technically within marketing, as is PR. So that's kind of the way our organization is set up. Like I said, we don't have a budget. We do have general goals. We're trying to establish all the baseline data so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot when we're setting our goals. So a lot of our goals right now are very general about growing audience size and things like that. But moving forward, it's going to be, okay, we know like in this quarter we generated this much ROI, and we know that we generated this much cost savings. So there's an expectation that maybe we can meet that or exceed it by 5 to 10%. But again, it's weird in the marketing realm. A lot of people are still stuck in kind of Mad Men era style advertising, right? So they just go, I'm going to spend a lot of money, and then the metric for me doing well is the fact that I spent money. Yeah, and what they'll do is, since they don't know how to track the funnel that we've been talking about, is they'll go to like an outside agency to basically crunch some magic numbers for them and say, you spent whatever on magazines or billboards. We think it brought in this much. Yeah, mixed modeling is what it is. So again, the huge benefit of digital is the fact that you can work on the fly. If you put up a billboard, you can't just tear it down right away. Whereas digital, if you're talking about Facebook advertising, you can change your audiences, your targeting, you can change your campaign length, your price, and you can show people how these processes are working, and they can see it. Because now everyone in our organization is getting really excited about social media advertising. Like every week now I have someone saying, I want to run a campaign and like target this audience, and they're going, oh my God, I can do that? Yes, you can. You've been able to do that actually a while now. So there's a lot of excitement and buzz around it. And we might actually have to like bring in someone else to just help us manage like all this digital and social media advertising, because it's getting to that point now. Job opportunity. Yes?
You talked about mixed numbers. Do you try to quantify the reputation building aspects of social media and digital advertising?
So she was asking about quantifying reputation building. So how do you do that, or do you do that?
So I'm wondering if you kind of have an example of that. Is it something you do at your organization? Or?
Well, I work for a church, so
okay.
Tracking bottom line is possible, but a little distasteful in my industry.
Right.
So it's more, I think, brand awareness, people knowing of our systems, and visiting, which is actually trackable somewhat, but we have a lot of people who intentionally fly under the radar.
Okay.
So I don't know, I have these more nebulous moving targets, and so I was just wondering if you had a way to pin down that portion of just awareness and positive feelings.
Yeah, I mean, you can do some kind of, general reputation monitoring and management, and you can quantify some of that. You just have to be sure your data is normalized across platforms. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I do.
So I know what you do, and I know exactly what you do. So I would say that for you, it's still the same, because on your forms, when people ask for information about the church, there should be a drop-down asking about where they heard about it from, or they call, and somebody should ask them so that you're tracking it. And then if they visit, then you can maybe hook that together. So, it really depends on that would be a program that you would have to put together. So what I find, and actually why I'm kind of digging into this, is because a lot of this measurement stuff, guys, isn't online. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not. It's really not. So, like, it starts online, but then when they come and they interact with you, then you have to have a place or an opportunity. So one of the churches I used to go to, we had something called the mugging ministry, and we'd give them a free mug whenever they, yeah, I know, it's really silly, but we did it. And what was great about that is that they would stop by for the free thing, and then we'd get their name and number. And so you could match that with whether they came online and asked for information. So that could then become your metric. Do you know how many people followed all the way through to visit? And how many people ask for information versus how many people eventually visit? So those visiting metrics then become kind of interesting, because then you know what percentage of people generally give in a church, and so you can actually take that percentage and apply it to the number of people who start attending. So you can say we got 10 people to start attending from our website, and we know that one will be somebody who's active in the church. I know the language. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, and that's like the other day you and I were talking about, a client you had recently talked to in a particular industry, and both you and I had basically came out with the same, very similar process for tracking figuring out that funnel for their business. Yeah, it was for oil and gas, and how the heck are you going to measure like social media to someone putting gas in their tank? That's very hard. But a lot of people want to work in oil and gas because it's good pay, good benefits. So you and I both kind of hammered in on the same thing. Well, you need to be measuring how many people you're recruiting via social media, and set up your funnel for that. And so again, it's just talking through these processes and figuring out, okay, what are you trying to measure? For this example here, okay, how many people came to the church? For this oil and gas client, okay, well, how many people are you recruiting via social media? What do you normally spend to recruit someone? What's the value of recruiting a new employee? Are the people you're recruiting over social media, is there some churn that's higher with them than other employees? So again, set up the process so you can start collecting this big pile of data, and then you can get in there, and when you hit those problem areas, they're not huge issues to tackle. You already have the data there, and you can kind of slice into it.
Questions? Yes.
How many dedicated resources do you have?
So how many dedicated resources do you have to social media? Yeah.
Just people? Me and Molly over there. That's it. I was doing it solo. Molly, you came on in March, so I was doing it solo until this past March. So
By the way,
that really shows the value of you tracking ROI, because now they're willing to hire someone, right?
Exactly.
So that's another thing. If you start measuring this, often you'll get more resources because you have the ability to show that it's paying off.
Right, and I think a lot of people they get hung up on like we don't have the right software or not enough people. And again, I was doing this for a long time with just like Excel, just the basic Facebook native console, just Twitter, I might use Buffer. So the process again is always going to be the same. It's just if you move to a nicer tool like a Sprinkler, a Radiant 6, a Spreadfast, it's going to make you more efficient, which is kind of what my pitch was. I said, here's our ROI, here's some of our cost savings. Okay, this means if we get another employee, we can be even more efficient. And if I get this tool, I spend less time cranking out these reports in Excel, and monitoring is easier. And it's building that business case.
It's a very good point on the business case, and I think that's probably one of the most important points. Yeah.
Have you guys dropped any social media platforms? Seeing if you've gotten success on Blogger, WordPress, Tumblr, or no success on Instagram? Have you guys said, hey, we're going to be non-traditional and go to 9 style tap rooms and
She's asking, like, on platforms and choosing platforms. Are you using the data and the things that you're getting to, ramp up a platform or get out of a platform?
So we do look at that data to, kind of evaluate how much time and resources we invest into a platform. Like, for instance, Pinterest is pretty hard for healthcare. Like, what are you going to be pinning? And then, are they going to go to the website or call a phone number from Pinterest? It's kind of hard. So, our policy is always, we don't just jump on the networks to be on them or platforms. We take a look at it, basic stuff here, okay, what makes this network unique? Is the audience to this network very specific, which in the case of Pinterest it is, what kind of tracking can you do on this network? For instance, Instagram, you can't embed links and they can't click on them. So, it's Instagram right now, it's kind of more of an engagement play. They're a Facebook product, so they're pumping out advertising now. It'll probably become a lot more business friendly in the next year. So again, our policy is always, we don't just jump on a platform to be there. Because I occasionally would get that question at like quarterly business meetings or whatever, like, why aren't we on this? And why aren't we on that? And for a while it was just like, well, there's just me. And so, when Molly came on, it's like, okay, well, yeah, we can take the plunge, we can manage, 2 additional networks and keep them fresh with content. And our blog just came out this past May, because again, we initially tried to pitch the idea of a blog, and we just couldn't get anyone to commit to contributing content on a regular basis. And so knowing that roadblock, we kind of set it up the second go around to say, the PR team, you're going to write something every single month. And you're our well, you're our reservoir. And then outside of that, we'll grab from other people. And now because of that, we have a consistent content schedule for the blog. We're showing that leads are coming from the blog. So again, just because you can be somewhere, doesn't mean you should. It's just like the whole measurement thing. Just because you can measure it doesn't mean you should. So it's always better to take your time. So when you do have that meeting with that executive and they're like, well, why are we on this? And can you actually show me how it's driving business? You can actually show them that as opposed to going, well, I don't know, I heard Instagram's really cool.
Yeah. Or make me a Facebook, please, or something like that. Yes.
So we use grade 6, and you said earlier that likes and stuff aren't necessarily the best way to measure ROI. But do you see tools as similar to rating itself as having a good ability to measure ROI?
So he's asking about tools like Radiant 6 and other tools like it. Is there tools that help you measure ROI?
So the really good tools I've noticed they come and go. So an example is like a Radiant 6. I haven't played around in Radiant 6 like over a year, but I did play with the platform. We use Spreadfast at Houston Methodist, and there actually is a mechanism in there you can assign a point value or a dollar value to KPIs, but we don't touch that stuff. It does integrate with Google Analytics, so we could, I think, potentially put in a lead value, so if we know social media drives that, but getting back to the point of all the good tools kind of go away. Like, for instance, there was a service for a while called Ootahay. Don't ask me to spell it. But it's gone, but it was really impressive because what it would do is when you shared like a bit.ly or a short URL in the social space, it would tag that if they clicked on it, it would give them a cookie, the user cookie for about a 90-day period. So say I'm sharing an article on the New York Times, and I'm doing a pure engagement play, right? I'm not driving traffic to my website for a lead or whatever. But if you clicked on that link, and then whatever you went about your business on the internet, and you eventually came back to me in that 90-day period, it gets attributed as social media. Because something Cammie and I talked about on the phone the other day was a lot of what we're doing right now is last click or last touch point attribution. And so the future moving forward is going to be more of, can I capture you at these multiple touch points? Because we know, like, for instance, you may see an ad on a billboard, and it kind of festers back here in your subconscious or whatever, and then you decide to, for instance, make a doctor's appointment, and then you tell us the wrong referral source or whatever. So consumers are being kind of attacked on all these fronts right now, and it's making tracking a little difficult. But so there's tools like Ootahay, which are gone. Argyle Social, which was around for a while, had a similar mechanism. Guess what? gone.
Were they actually
They get who are they part of?
they were
So it'd be great if they took that component that was in Argyle and and put it in this other platform. But so we're talking about cookies, but there's there's this front going on now where what can we track, and Google's saying like the traditional cookie may go away in another year or two. So again, just making sure, like for instance, we have the forms. That's great. That's one set of data. But we also have the contact center to match it up and see if it's jiving.
I would also say that, probably the issue is that Google wants to be the only one that can track anybody. So they're getting rid of everything else. Yeah, they do. So yeah, I would say that on the tools front, especially on a monitoring tool like Radian 6 that you're talking about, monitoring tools are really not measurement tools, just so you know. In my book, monitoring tools are a way for you to keep up with like what people are saying about you. So, and maybe to a certain degree sentiment, although positive, negative, neutral sentiment on tools is notoriously awful, okay? Notoriously awful. Plus the spam that comes through no matter how you limit it. And I mean, I've played with these tools. I've known Radian 6 since it started. So I've been playing with these tools forever. And really what I found is that none of them are perfect. There is not one perfect tool. And if somebody comes and says, yeah, we can do media measurement, social media measurement, and we can track your ROI, we're hooked up to Google Analytics. I mean, call me, because the truth is probably something else. But if it's true, I want to know about it. So I don't think it's going to happen because they're weak on something. They're strong on something, they're weak on something. And monitoring tools, let's just say this too, no matter what monitoring tool you have, it is not catching 100% of what's being said about you online. It just can't. They can do some of it, but they can't do it all. And also the dark web of Facebook, that half of it's not even public information. So you can't rely on it 100%. Now, there's ways that you can take that and look at how that matches up to like what you're seeing online, but you do need to have access to a platform, which is why it's really important to have a website still, because it's the only thing you actually own, really.
So I had a point about monitoring tools. Again, I haven't played in Radian 6 in a while, but in Spreadfast, you can slap a content label onto all your outbound or inbound content. So the way we use that, it does become more of a measurement tool for us, because if I know that that person, for instance, through our conversation is a patient, I can tag it as patient, and then I can tag it as it's this particular hospital, and then I can tag it as was it positive or negative. So when I go back to do my cost savings for social media, and we actually have a label that's called customer save. That means we turned it around. So we can go back into that data and go, okay, at the Willowbrook Hospital, we were able to turn one around and save you money. Here's a record of what happened and how we did it. Maybe it's a best practice that you can implement over there. So again, it always varies by business.
That's Spreadfast, right? That's Spreadfast. Also, Brandwatch can do that. And Brandwatch is a lot like Radian 6, but better for an analyst. My friends actually started Radian 6. I'm glad they made a lot of money. But I like some other things better. Sorry. Sorry, Marcel. So, any other questions?
Oh, another one.
How often are you reporting to whom?
So he said, how often are you reporting and to whom am I reporting? Generally, the way reporting works right now is it goes to the director of PR and the VP of marketing. And we usually do it on quarterly or every other quarterly basis, and then a year-end dive. A lot of these formulas that I've been trying to kind of calculate and crunch the numbers on, I was talking to our market research team the other day, and they were saying, like, okay, once we get this kind of gelled with what finance defines as this variable and what they have, they're talking about kicking that like all the way up to the C-suite, because again, for them, they just care about the dollar value. So eventually there's going to probably be a quarterly cost savings and ROI report that gets really granular that they can see, because again, they only see social media a lot of the time from what's public facing, so those kind of vanity metrics.
So guys, we are at the end of our time today. It kind of went by fast, so I want to just thank Jason for coming and talking to us about all of what he does. Could you give him a hand for kind of sharing? All right, so at the end here, we do always have our jobs time.